Hi, my name is Alanya. My students know me as Miss Wong. I'm a middle school math teacher. I'm going into my third year of teaching this year, so I thought I would share some tips and pieces of advice to new teachers. To give you some context, I taught 2 years in Tulsa, Oklahoma at a Title I, which is a low-income public school. I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I had one class of each, special education math. And this year I am working as a 7th grade math teacher at a Dallas public school, which also is a Title I school, serves a low income, high minority population. So that's to give some context as to my teaching experience and background. I did not study education in college. I studied psychology and Mandarin Chinese. So for those of you entering the education field who also didn't study education formally, I can definitely relate to that. Let's get right into it. My first tip or piece of advice is to figure out who you are before you're entering the classroom. I would say as a young teacher, as someone who went into teaching right after I graduated, the insecurities I had within myself at that time in my life played out in my classroom. So I was, in the first couple months of the school year, I was still dealing with post-grad blues and trying to establish myself. So I had moved from Chicago, where I was born and grew up and went to college, to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I had to make new friends and I had to figure out what kind of life I wanted to lead. Just a lot of things I wasn't sure about, whether I wanted to teach as a profession, as a career, whether this was just something that I was trying out. So there was so many things that I just didn't have figured out, and my students definitely picked up on that. So I think that kids can pick up on confidence and they can pick up on lack of confidence. So if we're not really confident, if we're confused about a lot of things, I think that our students will feel it, even if they're not able to articulate it. Students will expose you and call you out when they feel like you've been untrue, like you haven't stuck to your word about promises, or if they feel like you're not genuine. I know that in my first year of teaching, the students would call me out for being fake, and I was confused. I was like, why are they calling me fake when I thought I was being genuine to them? But then I realized I had to unpack that a lot of my working experience before then had been in customer service, and so I had worked in restaurants as hosts, as a server, and then also in hotels as a front desk agent. And so I spoke in a certain way that I saw as professional, but my students saw as maybe robotic or just disingenuine. Teaching will allow you to be really reflective on who you are and what you bring to the classroom. If you come in already knowing those things, you'll have an easier time when the kids say certain things to you. Back then, I didn't know how to respond back. Now I'm I used to work in customer service. So what you are seeing as fake is actually how I spoke professionally to adults. So I think that if you come into the classroom being confident with who you are, or just being as honest as you can be about not knowing, I think the kids will be really receptive to that. The second tip I want to give newer teachers, and something that I learned from a veteran teacher, is the power in being silent or speaking in a low voice. So in my first year, I yelled a good amount, or I spoke at high volumes, I should say, and kids are just so used to adults yelling and speaking to them in a commanding way that when you switch it up and you do something different, it gets their attention. So when you speak in a low voice, it forces the students to stop what they're doing, if they were talking, to stop talking or to change their behavior so that they can hear you. And they're kind of shocked. They're like, wait, why did she stop talking? Why isn't she yelling at us? Why isn't she giving us direction? Why isn't she standing up, trying to get our attention? Sometimes I would just stop talking when I saw that I lost the control of the classroom and sit down at my desk, and that definitely got their attention. They were like, wait, what's going on? She's real mad. There's power in being silent. There's power in speaking in a low voice, because kids will lean in or pay more attention to you. So my third tip is to share the responsibility with kids. So in my first year, I felt like I had to do everything. I felt like I had to scramble to erase the board. I felt like I had to scramble to push the chairs and get the class ready, for incoming classes, and that was just a lot for me because I had to worry about, you know, so many different things, like the bigger picture things and then just the small details that I wanted for my students. And so I would say don't stress about the small stuff and have students help whenever they can, whenever you feel comfortable with releasing control. And you know, if students are able to do it, allow them to do it. I would say that students enjoy helping, you know, and they enjoy feeling like they have a purpose and a role in your classroom. But also for the students that you may struggle with, I would say that giving them a role or a job in your classroom could actually help build your relationship, because it's like they might feel like, oh, you recognize them, you recognize their skill sets, their abilities, their strengths, and so you're using that to your advantage so that you get what you need done and that they have a sense of, I'm capable. She trusts me or he trusts me to take on this task and to do it. And so, you know, maybe if they were disruptive, they might rise to the occasion to be a model student, because it's like, hey, now I have a role and responsibility. That boosts in self-confidence, you know, is beneficial all around, not just for that student to realize that they're capable and that people acknowledge that they are, but also things can be done and you don't have to be so stressed trying to do it all yourself. The fourth thing I want to say, it's not really advice and it's like a piece of knowledge, I guess, is that teaching doesn't necessarily become easier over time in terms of like the situations that you have to deal with. But I would say that as your confidence in yourself and your abilities grows, it makes teaching easier. So knowing that you'll be able to handle situations no matter how hard they are or no matter, you know, what comes up, once you have that like belief in yourself and just knowing that like you have all the tools that you need to solve the problems that will come up, that's what makes teaching easier. It's not necessarily that you have a solution for every problem that arises. Maybe after teaching like 20, 25 years, you might get to that point because you've seen everything or you know about everything. But I would say that teaching becomes easier as you gain confidence in yourself and your abilities. So for me, even though I have 2 years of teaching experience, this year is going to be like my first year all over again because I've moved to a new school district, to a new school. I have to build relationships with my students, their families, the school staff. It's going to be a hard year. Like I already know that, I anticipate that, but I also have this belief in myself that no matter what comes my way, I'm open to learning, I'm open to finding solutions, and I have that belief in myself that everything will work out. So, fifth tip is to keep in mind that what others are doing in their classroom or what's worked for others might not work for you. I always say ask veteran teachers, ask experienced teachers, ask, you know, staff who've been at the school, whether it's the custodian or, you know, the front office person, for advice and for information. Like I'm definitely a fan of that. You know, I read teaching books and I, you know, attend seminars and go to professional developments. But I also have to keep in mind that what these professionals, what these researchers are saying might not necessarily work for me and my teaching style and what I'm comfortable with and the students that I work with. Take everything in fully, but also understand that you're gonna have to tweak some of those things, or even if you try some of those things, they might not work. And even, you know, what I did last year in Tulsa with my students might not work this year in Dallas with my students. Every year, you constantly have to change things up, and you'll have a set of techniques that you'll be able to pull from and feel confident, you know, using. But I would say that it's not like a cookie cutter, like every year you're gonna be this way, your class is gonna be this way. You'll constantly have to learn and relearn techniques or experiment with different things and to find the best match for your students. Yeah, those are my 5 tips to new teachers. Feel free to reach out if you have any further questions or if you have anything to add to some of the tips that I already gave. But I hope that this helped you, or I hope that you were able to share this with someone that it could be helpful for. And have a good day. I hope that you have a great school year.